Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Garden Roundtable. Well, today we're going to once again take a look at the crucial state of Bihar, which is going to go for polls, or which is actually already begun. The first phase is already done. The polling has begun in Bihar, but which way will the vote go? Yes, there is an anti-incumbency. I think most will agree after 15 years, Nitish has to answer a lot of questions. But who is going to benefit or reap this anti-incumbency? Is it going to be the BJP or is it going to be Tejasvi Yadav? And what about Chirag Paswan, who's really turning out to be the wild card? Opinion polls haven't given him much, but word on the ground is that he is going to do well. Well, to discuss this, joining me is a panel of political analysts, commentators, and psephologists. I have Radhika Ramaseshan. She is a consulting editor at Business Standard and a columnist. Neerja Chaudhary, she's a senior journalist, columnist, and political commentator. Nirmal Pathak is the editor at PTI Bhasha. Archit Mohan, a commentator and columnist. And Manu Sharma, he's with the Sea Voter. Radhika, what is your impression on the ground? You still think, I remember talking to you earlier, you were saying Tejasvi had the advantage. Are you still holding on to that?
Yeah, I am kind of holding on to that, yes. The first phase of polling recorded, I think, a turnout of about 57%, which is higher than what was recorded in 2015 and subsequently in the Lok Sabha elections. But I'm not drawing inferences from the high turnout. I mean, it could well be an endorsement of the centre's policies. It could well be a vote for Tejasvi. It's very hard to say at the moment. But what is very clear, what has been amply established by reports and analysis is that Nitish is slipping. Definitely, his fortunes are declining. And you brought up the issue of BJP, whether the BJP is going to benefit. Whether if the BJP is really in a position to benefit, then it should absorb quite a lot of the anti-incumbency that Nitish is facing, at least 20-30% of that, so that the NDA is in a position to come back. Now, is the BJP able to do that? Of course, there is enthusiasm for Narendra Modi. I mean, that comes through in all the reportage and anecdotal evidence that nobody is saying a word against Modi. In fact, people are praising. There is some endorsement for the Ram Mandir thing. There is nobody's talking about the farm policies with farm laws which have created such a stir in Haryana and Punjab. But is it good enough to offset Nitish's anti-incumbency? I think that question has to be answered. The BJP certainly did some miscalculations. This propensity to play one player against the other. I mean, they did it with Chirag Paswan. They played him against Nitish Kumar. Earlier, they tried to act very smart and prop up Maji, in a sense, against Chirag Paswan in order to disturb the Dalit votes. So we also have to see if the BJP's smart alecky tactics have actually worked on the ground or not. And now you're coming to Tejasvi. Tejasvi is really the wild card, in this election. Nobody gave him a chance 2 months ago. And with reasons too, because when the whole pandemic and the reverse migration was on, people said that most of the time he was camping in Delhi. He was not in Bihar. It's only much later that when he probably spotted anti-incumbency building against Nitish that he decided to plunge himself in the Bihar campaign and kind of got his act together. But he is pulling in crowds, huge crowds. There is a good deal of chemistry between him and the spectators. So we really have to, and he's also very cleverly, he's not referring to his father at all. In a sense, he has shed the Lalu baggage. I think that's a very clever kind of strategy. He's talking about economic justice and not social justice, because social justice started off as a very kind of a very good, very commendatory kind of concept. But somewhere along the way, it lost its way. Social justice meant empowerment of certain elite castes among the OBCs and the Dalits to the neglect of the others, which Nitish took advantage of by creating the EBCs and the Mahadalit categories. So he's cleverly avoiding a reference to social justice, which has become a very mixed kind of, which has mixed connotations. So it just means that he is playing two certain strategies. We just have to see what happens on the ground.
Nita, what is your take on what Radhika has said, and also on your first impression of the Bihar campaign? Do you also think Tejasvi has the edge?
Look, I would say certainly Nitish is down. And forget what Tejasvi is saying about him. It is from the Nitish camp that this sentiment is coming. If you can think of Nitish Kumar, who refused to share a stage with Narendra Modi at one time, he is the one, and he sought parity with the BJP in all the elections that have been held in recent time, including the 2019 election. That he should be as much of a figure as Narendra Modi. That Nitish Kumar today is saying, seeking the votes in the name of Narendra Modi. That it is Narendra Modi who's going to bring about a change and development in Bihar. Narendra Modi and not him, in brackets. So that is an indication that he knows he's losing ground. Secondly, of course, the BJP gave indication by removing his pictures from the posters. Thirdly, Narendra Modi himself, in his second phase of the campaign, second set of speeches, on the day the polling was held, he was in Darbhanga and other places. He concentrated on Ayodhya, and he concentrated on the achievements of the central government, not the state government. That is another indication. So and the way Nitish Kumar is losing his cool, it's very uncharacteristic of him. He's very measured, extremely courteous a man. I think they are rattled by the situation. Now, as Radhika says, can Narendra Modi's own popularity make up for all this? He's popular, but he's not been a factor in state elections enough to pull the BJP that many votes. We've seen it in several states. Therefore, the situation, I would say, safely it's a kante ki takkar, but is it going to be much more than that? And I feel this election is more about Nitish Kumar and the anger against him than about Tejasvi Yadav. Tejasvi Yadav happens to be there as the alternative pole and is a beneficiary of that anger. Now we need to see to what extent and the seats it gets translated into, which goes beyond Muslim Yadav.
Go beyond the Muslim Yadav. Archis, what is your take on the campaign, Tejasvi's campaign?
One, as Radhika also pointed out, 56% voter turnout, first phase. It's always difficult to draw inferences from that. But there have been anecdotal reports in newspapers, including the Hindu and some of the Hindi newspapers, which said that there were more numbers below 35 who had queued up, including lots of women. Now one has to surmise whether women will vote as under 35, wanting a change, or as women. So that's one. Second change is Nitish Kumar was out of the picture. There was social distancing happening between Nitish Kumar and Prime Minister Narendra Modi as far as advertisements were concerned in newspapers in Bihar. So that's not happening anymore. 3 days back, there was an advertisement where Nitish Kumar and Modi shared literally on the same page. Now, I think the inference from there is the BJP has realized they will sink or swim together. Until now, there's been this understanding that while Nitish is losing credibility and the anti-incumbency sentiment is against Nitish, BJP will somehow survive, benefit. I don't think that's happening. BJP is also suffering because of that anti-incumbency. Look, people like us sitting in Delhi might get fooled that, look, Modi ji is very popular, that's why everyone will vote for him. But these people have been together in the government at least since 2005. And they've been partners since 1995. People on the ground are not fooled. the finance minister is BJP's, the health minister is BJP's, a whole lot of reports. And there's local anti-incumbency also. People are asking primarily JDU and BJP candidates, what have you done? They've been YouTube, right now the younger generation is so savvy. They post these videos on YouTube. There's this video of a BJP minister who lands up in an area where he had promised to build a road. And these guys ask him, why didn't you build a road? And this is waterlogged area. And they demand that he walks through that waterlogged area. He refuses, and they ask him to get out of their area. So these kind of things are happening. Tejasvi is, as Nirjaji also said, Tejasvi is a beneficiary of this angle. The moot point again is whether Tejasvi can cut across this, overcome the caste barrier. Look, on paper, the NDA is so much more powerful. The caste coalition is so much more potent on paper. However, if Tejasvi can cut across this caste coalition and appeal to all kinds of youth from all kinds of castes, then he does have a chance. And it seems from the ground, there's also a lack of synergy between the BJP and JDU workers. There's a whole lot of JDU worker that hails from the Samta Party days. That is quite ideological. That isn't only into it for Satta. And then that JDU workers, old Samta Party worker, is very upset that BJP tried to betray them by launching Chirag Paswan's LJP against them. So there are a whole lot of factors which I think are unsettling both for JDU as well as for BJP.
What about the Congress and the RJD? People are saying that the RJD has wasted 70 seats. What Akhilesh did in UP, Tejasvi has done over here by giving such a chunk of seats to the Congress, which is really non-existent. Will the Congress drag the RJD down?
बिल्कुल, ये एक जनरल जो फीडबैक बिहार से आ रहा है वो ये भी, उसमें से एक ये भी है कि कांग्रेस को उसकी कैपेसिटी से ज़्यादा सीट्स आरजेडी ने दे दी। और उसमें एक इम्पॉर्टेंट फैक्टर ये भी है कि जिन 70 सीट्स पे कांग्रेस है उसमें से 48 सीट्स पे उसकी डायरेक्ट फाइट बीजेपी के साथ है। तो वो, और बीजेपी का और कांग्रेस का वोट, उसमें आप अगर मुस्लिम फैक्टर छोड़ दें तो ऑलमोस्ट वो जो अपर कास्ट वोट है या अदर बैकवर्ड कास्ट का वोट है वो मिलता जुलता है, और वहाँ बीजेपी को काफी एज है कांग्रेस के कंपैरिजन में इन 48 सीट्स पे। तो एक वो है। दूसरा फिर जो ये सीट डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन हुआ है पार्टीज के बीच में, जिन 70 सीट्स पे आरजेडी और जेडीयू कंटेस्ट कर रहे हैं आमने सामने, और जेडीयू ने इस बार करीब नीतीश कुमार ने अपना माइनॉरिटी जो वोट बैंक है उनका, उसको साथ में रखने के लिए उन्होंने 10-12 सीट्स, उन्होंने अपने 10-12 मुस्लिम कैंडिडेट्स भी उतारे हैं। तो वो किस तरह से प्ले करेगा, ये आरजेडी को उसका कितना फायदा होगा या नुकसान होगा। आरजेडी का जो अपना वोट बैंक है मुस्लिम और यादव, वो तो उसका इंटैक्ट है, वो करीब 26-27% के आसपास होता है, पर वो क्या सफिशिएंट होगा? वो जो फर्स्ट फेज के जो इंडिकेशन आए हैं उसमें ये है कि ये मुस्लिम और यादव ने कंसोलिडेट होके वोट किया है आरजेडी को, पर वो क्या सफिशिएंट है? क्योंकि उसके जो दूसरी और कास्ट हैं, बिहार का इलेक्शन आप चाहे कितनी बात कर लें, उसको नीतीश कुमार के अगेंस्ट एंटी इनकम्बेंसी काफी ज्यादा है इंडिविजुअली उनके अगेंस्ट में। चीफ मिनिस्टर को कोई पसंद नहीं कर रहा वहां पे। बीजेपी के साथ सेंटर की एंटी इनकम्बेंसी थोड़ी बहुत होगी, लेकिन मोदी की, प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी की पॉपुलैरिटी अभी भी इंटैक्ट है ग्रास रूट लेवल पे। तो वो कितना एक दूसरे को ये फैक्टर काउंटर करते हैं, उसमें ये बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है। यहाँ बैठ के वो दिख रहा है कि तेजस्वी की रैलीज में भीड़ आ रही है, पर इस बार ग्राउंड्स बहुत छोटे हैं जहाँ पब्लिक रैलीज हो रही हैं, और उसमें और फिर टेक्नोलॉजी का है कमाल की वो छोटी सी भीड़ को भी किस तरह से ज्यादा दिखा दे। वो दोनों कर रहे हैं उसमें, महागठबंधन के लोग भी कर रहे हैं और एनडीए के लोग भी कर रहे हैं। पर जो एक बात जो पूरे सभी जगह से सामने आ रही है वो ये कि नीतीश कुमार की जो पॉपुलैरिटी है वो बिल्कुल बॉटम पे है इस सब, और नरेंद्र मोदी लेकिन उसको कितना भरपाई कर पाएंगे उसकी, ये बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट होगा। इसलिए जो जनरल असेसमेंट एक आ रहा है वो ये कि एनडीए, बीजेपी या आरजेडी में से कोई भी नंबर 1 पार्टी हो सकती है और नीतीश नंबर 3 पे ही होंगे, जेडीयू नंबर 3 पे ही होगा। अब कितनी सीट्स निकलती हैं उसमें आरजेडी की, वो पिछली बार से अगर ज्यादा लेके आते हैं, कांग्रेस इसमें उनके लिए बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट वो हो जाता है कि जिस तरह से कांग्रेस के कैंडिडेट्स लड़ रहे हैं, पिछली बार वो करीब 40 सीट्स पे लड़े थे और उसमें से 20 या 22 सीट उनकी आई थी। इस बार वो 70 सीट्स पे लड़ रहे हैं और 20-22 तक पहुंचेंगे, इसको लेके भी अभी वहां से डाउट्स हैं।
Manu, you heard all the analysts and all. You have been doing your own data mining. So tell us what is your feedback? What have you heard, and what are your predictions?
Well, so before I tell the feedback, I'll just lay out the context. There are 3 important factors that need to be looked at when analyzing any data coming out of Bihar. First one is, as some of the other panelists have rightly pointed out, Bihar is the proverbial Legoland of Indian politics. The blocks of castes are predefined. You just merely have to rearrange them in the form of alliances. So when RJD and JDU get together, their block is bigger than the BJP's, and no matter, there is a Modi wave or anything else going on in the country, they go on to merrily win the election, right at the high noon of Modi wave. But this time around, it's BJP plus JDU, and the social coalition is definitely very formidable. That's the first point. Second is that while the rest of the country is contracting and the economic growth is no longer a growth, it's contraction, there has been agricultural growth. And that agricultural growth, I was looking at some economic data, has been skewed towards the states which are considered laggards in agriculture, and that could be due to the direct benefit transfers or whatever be the case. But the so-called stimulus has been perhaps pumped a little bit more towards the states which were considered the laggards, and Bihar is a beneficiary of it. So when it comes to economic factors or distress, situation is not that bad in Bihar compared to the normal. There is no food price inflation. That's one of the bigger successes of the central government, which keeps a lid on anti-incumbency. Third is the micro-patronage. The success of Modi government, and to some extent Nitish Kumar, with women voters, with voters, who are not considered to be part of traditionally powerful chunks of communities, who hold the sway in rural areas, they have been patronized by both Nitish Kumar and Modi alike. Now let us come to what could go wrong. Now, post-Mandal Bihar, we have observed that no matter what happens nationally, Lalu Yadav's MY alliance will poll roughly a third of the votes. No matter they win or they lose, they will get their at least 33% vote share. Now, if they get into an alliance that guarantees them slightly bit more than that, they go in for a landslide. Or if the opposition is divided, again, it's a landslide. So there is no division of opposition here. So the only thing that they can hope for is transfer of votes from the other social coalition. Now, how can that take place? That can only take place if a substantial chunk of youth vote moves from the NDA side to the UPA side. I wrote an article with Mr. Deshmukh in the Hindu after the previous Vidhan Sabha elections, and in that we observed that during that election, there was some migration of youth vote from MY towards BJP and JDU alliance back then. So is a reverse one possible, and with a higher amplitude? Let us see. But so far, right up to 23rd, we conducted our last poll. In any of the region, any of Bihar's region, and including the 2 most important ones of Bhojpur, Magad, in no region was the UPA alliance getting more seats than NDA. And that is the problem. And the whole question of Tejasvi had 2 challenges. First was to save his house. That he stood. From all accounts, it looks like he's holding on to the vote share that his father had very painstakingly built up. Now, the trouble for him is this class ceiling of going beyond 35%. because the BJP and JDU, even in the worst of the times, will comfortably cross 40% vote share. If Tejasvi is able to get into those 40%, and then the whole distribution of vote share comes into being, that voters are particularly concentrated in some regions and in others they are not, then perhaps there will be some pathways to victory for him. But till that time, it's still advantage BJP and JDU, I think.
Okay, we're going to take a break and come back, and we're going to talk about the one dominant image or narrative of the election. That's what I'm going to ask all the panelists, but after a quick break. And welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We're here discussing the Bihar elections. Radhika, before the break, I asked everyone what would be the one dominant image or narrative of the election. What really stands out, say, for you? What would you say?
Well, if you're just going by imagery, it is definitely the crowds that Tejasvi Yadav is pulling in. I don't know whether the grounds have deliberately been compressed. I mean, I can't imagine how a large ground can be compressed to half the size, because the crowds are jostling and they're going to his helicopter and they're milling around his helicopter, in fact. So, for me, I think that would be the dominant imagery. Here's a person who I myself have written pieces saying that he's just not able to get any traction, and had the opposition been more robust, then this election might have foretold a different story. But so he is a bit of a surprise element, at least to me, in these elections meetings, and also, a fair bit of maturity that he's showing in his speeches. He is studiously not attacking Modi, even when Modi provoked him about Jungle Raj going into the hands of the youths now. He says, well, that's Modi. I mean, that's his way of saying things, but he should have focused on development and economic issues. Mm-hmm. He didn't answer back and say that, what is this? What is he saying? Similarly, Nitish, I mean, the farthest he has gone is to call him a Paltu Chacha, which he's always been referring to Nitish as Paltu Chacha. So he is focusing on the issues, and that shows a certain level of maturity, certain level of prudence. Whether he's done a wise thing, giving away 70 seats to the Congress, I don't know. But then he's also accommodated the left parties, and maybe at some point, one should discuss about the left parties, especially the ML, which has a base in Bihar.
That's true.
CPI especially had a strong base at one time. So there are left votes, and which he didn't do in the Lok Sabha. So he has revised his strategy and accommodated the left. And I'm sure whether it's 1%, 2%, they are going to bring something to the table, the left party.
I agree. Actually, that's a story that we haven't talked about, but a silent story that may give some results. Nija, what would be your dominant narrative of this election?
My dominant narrative?
Narrative or image?
Yeah, both are interlinked. If you look back 3 weeks ago, everybody was saying that Nitish Kumar will come back to power, maybe with a reduced majority, have a fourth term. He's losing ground, but there's so much disarray on the other side. And generally, that was the conservative wisdom till about 3 weeks ago. Suddenly, things have changed. Why? It's the large numbers that are thronging Tejasvi Yadav's meeting. Largely youth. And it's not only the number of people thronging, it's the sentiment. I keep saying this, Priya, that those of us who've covered elections, and all of us here have, over the years have pick out the average normal meeting from a meeting that's alive. There's something there, something crackles. That means people want change. And it's that sentiment that one is getting, from Tejasvi Yadav's meeting. Now, MY is coming in very large numbers to his meeting. Aggressive, no doubt about that. But if Nitish Kumar has lost ground further in the last 6 months, and Tejasvi has picked up now. Earlier he had no traction, we all agree on that. Then it has something to do with COVID-induced economic distress around the issue. If there's one, if you can sum up Nitish Kumar's woes in one word, it is joblessness in Bihar. That's become the issue. Therefore, if joblessness and economic distress have become such an issue, it must have something to do with the migration that took place, the reverse migration. Now, those who marched back, and the migrants are supposed to be around 3 million in Bihar. And if those who walked back, most of them, the migrants, are non-upper caste. How have they been affected? Are they also, do they belong in large numbers? Are they Dalit castes? Are they Ati Pichda caste, extremely backwards, apart from the MY? Are these people, so I would say the two categories who can look at Tejasvi Yadav in addition to MY, it is the Ati Pichda, a smattering of the Dalits, as well as which will be part of the migrant, as well as the youth from other castes. So
Archis, Nija, I'll interrupt you. We're kind of running out of time. I want everybody to have a quick word. Archis?
Yeah. So again, it's linked to the crowds that Tejasvi Yadav is getting, but not in my mind, in the BJP's mind primarily, because my image of this election is the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman landing in Patna and announcing those 19 lakh jobs as well as that vaccine. I mean, I just can't get over that. 2 days, even 12 hours before that, everyone in BJP and JDU is ridiculing Tejasvi Yadav about his job promise, where will he get his money, etc., etc. And then you announce 19 lakh jobs. Again, the difference at best is entrepreneurial jobs versus government jobs. But again, it's mostly about perception. They were forced to get onto a territory that Tejasvi had laid out for them. And it is bad news for BJP already. If they have to overcome this entire narrative on jobs and other local issues, and mind you, they haven't been focusing on that at least since Lok Sabha. In Maharashtra, they tried all this 370, CA, etc., etc. In Jharkhand, they tried. Yogi Adityanath went to Jharkhand and said, "Oh, some assembly, some Congress candidate is Muslim. He's anti-Ram Mandir, etc. Please don't vote for him." And the people voted for him, and that guy won. And said eventually that, "Oh, I'll be the first one to go and put a Sheila in that Ram Mandir, help build that Ram Mandir." So the BJP has been focusing on 370 and all these national security issues. They lost Jharkhand. They didn't do as well as they wanted to do. Maharashtra, Haryana, Delhi. Now Bihar, they again tried that. And Bihar, after COVID, after all we have seen during lockdown, etc., Tejasvi has been able to get them to talk about jobs. From Bihar, we go to Bengal. They don't have a face in Bengal. They are trying to challenge Mamata Banerjee in Bengal. If this narrative survives, and BJP needs to do stupendously well, its strike rate needs to be very good, to somehow tell the world, no, our national security narrative will survive. If this survives, it's really bad news next year, at least for the BJP.
Nirmal, quickly, your dominant.
No, Priya, I don't agree with this perception that Tejasvi just got traction in media. He was there. आपको ध्यान होगा अभी 2-2.5 महीने पहले इसी प्रोग्राम पे जब ये उसके आरजेडी से कुछ एमएलसीज शिफ्ट हुए थे, उन्होंने आरजेडी छोड़ के और जेडीयू ज्वाइन किया था और रघुवंश प्रसाद को लेके कंट्रोवर्सी चल रही थी। उस समय भी मैंने कहा था कि तेजस्वी बहुत ही एक मैच्योर लीडर की तरह वहाँ काम कर रहे हैं और वो सबसे बड़ी जो उनकी खासियत है वो ये कि उन्होंने लालू प्रसाद की गैर मौजूदगी में इतने समय तक आरजेडी को यूनाइट रखा है। आप उसके तेजस्वी के फोर साइडेडनेस इससे भी देख सकते हैं, वो रघुवंश प्रसाद की जगह पे वहाँ वैशाली में रामा सिंह को लाना चाह रहे थे जो मुसलमान हैं और जिनका काफी विरोध हुआ, लेकिन तेजस्वी ने उस पे बैक नहीं किया अपने को। लास्ट में रघुवंश प्रसाद ने छोड़ी पार्टी। अगर आप इमेजिन करिए अगर रामा सिंह को उन्होंने छोड़ दिया होता तो आज वैशाली में तेजस्वी को और ज्यादा नुकसान होता वहां पे। तो वो उस चीज को आगे देख के ये कहना बड़ा आसान है कि वो यहाँ दिल्ली में बैठे हुए थे और वहां कुछ नहीं कर रहे थे, ये बिना कुछ किए ऐसा नहीं होता है। तो तेजस्वी ने काफी मैच्योरिटी उसमें दिखाई है और वो बिहार के लिए अभी इसमें नहीं तो आगे के लिए उसका उन्होंने अपने लिए एक जगह वहां पे जरूर तय कर ली है। तो इस इलेक्शन का सबसे बड़ा जो एक चीज सामने आई है वो तेजस्वी यादव की लीडरशिप है। उसको बिल्कुल भी इग्नोर, हम चाहे कुछ भी कहते रहें कि उसको अभी अभी ट्रैक्शन मिला है, वो मुझे ऐसा नहीं लगता। वो काफी लंबे समय से।
Okay. Quickly, I'll just get Manu in and Manu, quickly your last.
Yeah, first is that I would second Nirmal ji's point that Tejasvi was always working hard. It is just that the media is now beginning to focus on him and his work. He was always there on the ground and off the ground. Now, coming to it, what is the narrative? The narrative is pretty simple. Generational shift. In the next Vidhan Sabha elections, we won't be talking the Lalu Yadavs, the Nitish Kumars of the world. Ram Vilas is sadly gone. So it will be all about Chirag Paswan, Tejasvi, and whosoever comes up as a successor in the JDU side. So this election is all about generational shift, no matter who wins.
Well said, Manu. In fact, I was also thinking this election is about the youth, because it began with a focus on Chirag, then it's gone on to Tejasvi, and of course the youth voter. So probably, let's see, a lot of messages coming out of Bihar. The impact it will have on the national elections is another discussion for a later time. But thank you all for watching this show, and all of you for taking part in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.